Yeah, so thank you so much for coming out today. I know we're supposed to do this last week, um, but I'm really excited to be doing it now. And the fact that I'm pioneering it's absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for that. So this presentation is, it's pretty much, the first part is going to be pretty much you guys learning a little bit about me. And then the second part, we're just going to dive straight into what, firstly, what is a UX portfolio and like how to prepare it, one that's good to get you hired in one of the top companies in the world, well, any top company in the world, right? And then next thing we'll talk about UX resumes or CVs and cover letters. And then lastly, we'll finish off with a Q&A section, right? Q&A session. So, all right. So I'm just going to reintroduce myself and kind of dive deeper into some information about myself. So first of all, my name is Tadiwa. You can call me Tad, you can call me Teddy. Anything is fine. And I'm actually from Zimbabwe, right? So I came to America in 2016, Atlanta, Georgia to be specific. And this was to study computer science and, sorry, just give me a second. Yeah, and then this was to study computer science. However, I eventually found a passion in the UX space, right? So I know some of you talked about graphic design and all these different things. And some of you might not even know what UX is, right? So UX is actually an abbreviation for user experience. And what user experience is it's essentially how users interact with and experiences how a user interacted sorry how a user interacts with and experiences product, system, or service, right? It essentially includes a person's perceptions of utility, ease of use, and efficiency, right? So that's the Google definition of a user experience designer. So as a user experience designer, right, your job is to essentially think about a problem that your users are having, and then you consider all these things that we talked about, right? So the user's perceptions of utility, ease of use, and efficiency, you use all of that to judge your decisions when you're coming up with a solution, right? So that's what that's pretty much a little, diving into what UX is. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what actually brought me into UX, right? So I actually fell in love with the idea of creating, using my creativity, using my love for just graphics and just problem solving skills, right? To improve the way that people um, explore or to improve the way that people experience digital products, right? And this primarily, I primarily saw this when I was still in Zimbabwe. I mean, back then I didn't know it was user experience, but I thought the path for that was computer science, right? So some of you may know that I actually started off at Kutama College and then I ended up transferring to St. George's College, right? But the main difference that I noticed between these two schools was that Kutama College, which is a public school, and then St. George's, a private school, the main difference was that at St. George's, I was able to have access to software that allowed me to do small things that just made my life easier, right? So booking out a library book, right? Or a CD or whatever it is, right, from my computer instead of actually physically going out there and just being able to, extend my time and stuff like that on my computer, right? Stuff that I wasn't able to do when I was still at Kutama College, right? So that was one instance of, the power of computers, the power of experiences that I really enjoyed. And then later on in college, I started realizing that the way, I often found myself putting in more effort in classes that had, software and applications that were not built well or that didn't have good user experiences, right? Softwares that were difficult to use, right? So I constantly found myself spending more time trying to learn the software instead of just easily understanding how it works and just learning and just, pretty much passing the class without any struggle, right? So half of my time was learning the software. Then compared to classes where the software was easy and straightforward, I didn't even need to spend any time there. So most of those classes didn't put in a lot of effort and I just passed them easily. All right. So, like I said earlier, I have a background in computer science. That's what I studied in high school. That's what I studied in college. But I actually started computer science in high school in Form 3, which is about grade 9, grade 10 in America. And then, it was, of course, it was something that I loved. And like I said, I thought it would lead me to the design side, the front end side, right? But it turned out to actually be, an advantage, because now when I work with others, right, I have this advantage of that I can code, I understand both sides of a product, right? So the design side as well as the engineering side. So I'm able to be a bridge between designers and engineers. I'm able to communicate what we can do and what we can't do. I'm able to, hang out with the engineers and the designers at the same time. And yeah, so currently I'm actually working as an associate product designer at Mark 33 in New York. And one thing that I really love about, telling people about my job is that I work remotely, right? So that means I never have to see the office, right? I'm actually located in Atlanta, Georgia, but my office is in New York. So literally here where I am right now, this is my office, right? This is how I do all of my work, which is just an amazing thing about being in this industry. All you need is your laptop, right? So there at Mark 33, I mentioned a little bit about it, but we pretty much there as a product designer, I help, I contribute towards empowering communities and their governments with new technologies, right? That improve the safety and quality of life for old people. Right. And as I mentioned earlier, it's pretty much creating software for first responders, creating software for police officers, right? Creating software for firemen, that kind of pretty much software that helps these people to work better, right? Analytic systems and dispatching systems. That's the kind of work that I do, and it's really exciting. Hopefully I get to talk about this more later on in another presentation. But then next thing I want to talk about, which is kind of a shameless plug, is Tadloid.com. So I know you see this shirt that's making me look handsome over here. And this is a company that I started. It's called Tadloid. And pretty much it is an amazing company that with an amazing mission to help international students, primarily Southern Africans, to study in the US, paying as minimal as possible, right? So tuition, school fees, and also housing itself. So we just pretty much find scholarships and all these different things to help reduce your costs. And we help you come here, pretty much the whole process, the visa process, all of it, will help you with that. So definitely, if you want to learn more about that, go to tadloid.com, and yeah, learn more about us, and hopefully you can be a client. And then when I'm not working, you can definitely find me hiking or exploring some new parks, usually with my fiance. And you can also find me doing DIYs. I mean, if you check my hands, there are a lot of calluses everywhere. I love gardening work, tiling, and then just like restoring furniture, stuff that I can do with my hands, right? So I mentioned creativity earlier. So I love just doing anything where I can build things, whether it be it software or, physical things. It's just, I don't know. I think it runs in my family. Well, my dad's a farmer, so yeah. And then the next thing is that I love playing FIFA, right? So FIFA, whatever the latest FIFA is, I love doing this because this is my brother's favorite game. So I get to spend a lot of time with him playing FIFA. I love listening to music, and I love working on side entrepreneurial projects. And I know I said when I'm not working, this is what I do, but in a way, it's a way of relaxing for me, just thinking about problems and trying to solve them. So yeah, so now that you know a little bit about me, I know actually the chat is not working, right? Okay. All right. I was gonna ask you guys to tell me a little bit about, like, tell me where you're coming from and where you're watching from and so forth, but it's okay. So next, I'm just gonna dive straight into the presentation itself, right? So the first part is UX portfolios, right? Tips on that, like what are they for, and so forth, right? So what is a UX designer portfolio? All right, a lot of people are asking me this when I posted this on my Instagram. So here it is. So a UX designer portfolio essentially showcases a designer's work, right? Typically, it contains detailed case studies, of design projects, as well as demonstrating skills and the approach of the designer, right? So some of you may not know what a case study is, but it's essentially a process or record of research in which detailed consideration is given to the development of an idea or a particular project over a period of time. All right, so the whole point of these projects are for you to essentially highlight your range of experience and skills, right? So you build a portfolio so that recruiters and hiring managers for companies that you're trying to apply for can, check out this stuff, right? How much experience do you have? How skilled are you, right? How much potential you have, right? Those are all things that recruiters care about. So um, first tip, right, is of course you have to share the actual projects, right? So some people ask me, hey, do I need 4? Do I need to put all my projects on there? But I think 3 to 5 is a great number, right? So 3 to 5 case studies. And you don't want to add too much because you want projects that showcase the best version of you, right? Remember, you're trying to highlight your range of experience and skills. So the very best projects that allow you to showcase these skills are what you want to put on there, right? So a recruiter may just come, or even another designer at that company, right, who's hiring may be like, hey, you know what, they'll pick a random project and then they'll ask you to run through it. And you don't want a case, I actually did this, you don't want a case where you have a project that does not really highlight your skills and they pick that project and now you're forced to come up with all these lies because you want to show skills that are not in that project, right? And of course you can't really switch because they've chosen it and you've put it on there for a reason, right? Anyway, so if you don't have any work experience, another good thing is to share your college projects, right? Really anything that helps you show that you have some kind of skill that's relatable to the UX field, right? If you have experience in a different field, you want to share that, right? I know, Kim, you said you had experience in, sorry, do you mind reminding me? I think it was fashion, right? You said, no, engineering.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
bit of
So
both.
exactly. So, a good example of sharing information in a different field. I know you mentioned that you had experience in research, right? And I mentioned that you want to show, like how you did your research, right? You want to talk about your, the goals you set for that research, and then the process of actually, like extracting information from potential, I guess, in fashion it would be like clothes wearers, relative to users, but you want to share what you spoke to them about, questions you asked, right? What was your process? What was your thinking like, right? How did you extract information from them? And then you want to you want to pretty much write up your project in a way where a recruiter or a design manager can pretty much see it and see that, okay, this is something that we do in UX, right? This is something we can definitely use. And so a lot of these skills in different industries, even if you don't have any work experience, let's say college experiences, a lot of it really is transferable to the UX industry. It's really basic skills that you can always use in the UX field. All right. So the next thing too is that you want to share your end-to-end process. I mentioned this in the previous slide, right? You want to clearly articulate the problem and the final solution, right? So make sure that you show even the tiniest of information, right? Sketches, right? I put a picture down here of a sketch that I did on a napkin on a serviette, right? Yeah, I put a thing of a serviette on there, and then basically on the serviette, I was just drawing up some ideas. So I actually use this in a presentation or in my portfolio presentation, right? And I was trying to show them that I was one of my ideas that actually went into one of my projects actually came from, a napkin that I put up, like I was sitting down and I was thinking, I just had a napkin and a pen next to me and I wrote it down, right? So you want to share stuff like, for example, if you look here, you have, is essentially the flow of the Tadloid website, right? From the moment you land on there to the moment you decide to book a call or actually like exit, explore other pages or exit the site. Or so all of that information is very important. In fact, I encourage you to add it because that's the process you go through, right, to coming up with the final solution from the point that you actually discover what the problem is. So And then moving on, the next thing you want to do is also clarify the role, right? You want to clarify what you actually did in that project. You want to talk about if you're a UX designer or a researcher, you want to tell them that's what you did and how you actually made a difference as a designer, or how you made a difference in that role, right? So what was your impact in that study, right? You can talk about how you took Sally's research or how you used Kim's research to create mock-ups or wireframes that helps you come up with this final solution, whatever it is, right? So, and then the next thing too you want to talk about is the cross-functional collaborations you did. So one thing that really matters to recruiters and managers and hiring managers and other designers is that they want to see if you can collaborate with other people, right? This was a big problem for me initially because I was freelancing by myself. I was not working with other people, and a lot of times, hiring managers would tell me that I just didn't have enough experience, and a lot of it I ended up seeing that it was about collaboration. I never spoke to collaboration, my experience with that. So I ended up finding senior designers on LinkedIn that could help me with whatever projects they're working on, or that I could help with other projects that they were working on, or even them helping me with any small projects I was working on, right? And they're also very like a lot of online voluntary organizations that allow you to design websites and applications for nonprofits and any charitable organizations and so forth, right? So moving on, the next thing you want to do too in each project, of course, is to provide context, right? You want to ensure that a recruiter is able to read through your project without you being there to explain, right? So if I'm to walk through your project, I want to understand what you did from A to Z, right? What was your problem, right? How did you figure out that that was the problem, right? And then was it an assumption you made and so forth? You want to state all of that, right? And then how did you navigate that in the next and pretty much move on to a final solution, right? I want to understand all of that without having to ask you questions. It has to be clear as day, right? Because also as a UX designer, right, you're expected to know how to do this kind of stuff, right? To be concise in your work, to clearly articulate your work, right? So remember, a portfolio is essentially just another project. You want to treat it like another project that you've worked on, right? So you need to think about your audience, right? If you're a UX designer, you probably know what a persona is. Um, you want to create personas, and usually it's like your recruiters, your hiring managers, or other designers, right? So you want to consider that recruiters, yes, they know about UX, however, they're not experts, right? So you want to create um, a portfolio with language that's not too deep that will confuse those recruiters, right? But also at the same time, you want to ensure that your hiring managers know exactly what you're talking about, and then your other designers know that you're skilled enough to do all of these things, right? Uh, Hold on, just give me a second. I'm not sure what happened to one of my slides. Okay, anyway, so the next thing that you want to, a lot of people ask me is about the nature of a portfolio. So some people think, they talk about, they've asked me, do I need to have a website? Does it need to be a PDF or a notebook or something like that? And honestly, it doesn't matter, right? As long as you're able to show your work. However, I do advise you to use a website or a web hosted PDF. And the reason is because as a UX designer, one of the things you really have to consider is accessibility, right? How easily can people find your information? How easily can these recruiters find you or your work and so forth, right? So having a PDF in your computer is not going to help them because first of all, they need to contact you to look at that work. And then having a notebook, of course, you may be invited to show it in person, great. But what if that recruiter is thinking about looking at your work late at night in the AMs, right? So the best version is obviously a website. Another, honestly, equivalent version, like it's just as good as a web hosted PDF, right? And an example of places where you can host them, you can have a PDF hosted in Google Drive, which is actually very cheap compared to a website where you have to pay for hosting and all that kind of stuff. And then also, if you look down here, this is actually an example of, this is what my portfolio looks like. Uh, a lot of people have asked me this before, what kind of information do I need to include, right? What kind of pages do I need to include on my website, right? And it's pretty, I mean, it's pretty easy, right? You just need a short and very concise website, right? So the first page should be a homepage, right? So you want something that pretty much shows an introduction, talks about you a little bit. So for example, if you look down here, I'm introducing myself as a UX designer, and then I'm also, telling them a little bit of my, my philosophy, what I care about, right? That's something that helps get people interested in your work or in what you're doing, right? And then if you look here, I also add, this was when I was still looking for a job. I haven't really updated it yet, but just adding a little note, telling them exactly what you're looking for and your purpose for, what you're looking for and what you want to do with, I guess, with that portfolio, right? So main things you want on that homepage is, of course, introduction. You want links to the case studies because, of course, it's a portfolio. That's the whole purpose, to show your work, right? And then also a link to your resume. You want everything to be in one place. And then another page that really matters is an about page, right? A lot of people relate to people that are vulnerable, that show, more information about themselves, and they're just not very private, right? So you want to be able to talk a little bit about yourself, your interests, right? And then if you want, some people share their socials. I personally don't, but I actually have links to my Instagram, but not like an embedded version of my Instagram. But that's something you can always do, and also add links, right? So a link to your LinkedIn, a link to your phone number or email address, just the way that that recruiter can possibly find you in case, they got it through a referral. How are they going to communicate with you if you don't have those contact links? The next thing is nav bar, right? So we all know what a nav bar is. It's essentially this block at the top here that shows links of your website, right? So like I said, it's just two things that really matter. I like to have a homepage. Here I just call it work because that's where my work is. And then an about section, an about page, and then a link to my resume. So that's pretty much what my portfolio looks like. And then finally, as you're prepping your portfolio, you need to ensure that you're asking yourself the following questions, right? So first off, is your portfolio easy to follow, right? Is it user friendly? That's pretty much a standard for a UX designer. So if you can't answer yes to this question, there is definitely something wrong with how you've designed your portfolio so far. So you need to reconsider, because not only is the recruiter or the designer judging you based off the work that you've done in the past, but like I said earlier, your portfolio itself is a form of a project, right? You're showing how you present work. And if you can't do that, how can we trust you to work for us, to present work to our clients, right? So think about that. And then also, does each case study reflect how I drive my design thinking and process, right? So I've highlighted design thinking here because I think some of you may not know what this is. So design thinking is essentially a human-centric process that design teams use to understand and solve their user problems, right? So many different industries actually use this. So this is not just tied to UX, but I think the engineering industry uses this, and also fashion and all those different other industries use this design thinking process, right? And it typically involves an empathy stage, which is essentially a discovery stage where you're talking to your users, trying to understand what your problem is, right? And then also a definition stage where you take all that data that you would have gathered you define it and you synthesize pretty much what's the problem we're trying to solve, right? You come up with assumptions. Okay, so these users they have these problems, right? So what assumptions can we make based on that? What do we need to do, right? And then also an ideation phase, which is basically um, the stage where you take that information you would have gathered, right? So you now know the problem, and you want to come up with ideas on how you can solve it, right? So you're brainstorming with your team, you're getting feedback from your stakeholders and so forth. And then the next stage is the prototyping, right? So this is actually building what you've created, what you've, thought about, the possible solutions. You come up with one final possible solution and you're now building it out so that you can eventually test it, right? I mean, what is the point of designing if you can't test the work that you're doing, right? You need to get some feedback so that you know whether to continue in this process again, reiterate, or if you're done with the project and you need to move on to something else. So that's pretty much it for the um, the portfolio side. Hopefully, I'm pretty sure you guys might have some questions, so definitely write those down. And I'm hoping you guys are actually enjoying this presentation so far. If you don't mind, you can just like unmute yourself and I just want to see if you guys are awake and you're not bored to death. You guys there? There we go. All right, awesome. All right. Awesome, awesome. All right. So next I'm going to be talking on how you can prepare a UX resume, um, and pretty much the best tips on doing it. So this actually applies to any industry, right? Of course, there's a UX presentation, but I think if you're in any other industry, you can definitely use these same concepts. So what is a UX resume, right? What is it for, right? So UX resumes are essentially concise overviews that summarize designers' work experience, education, skills, and other relevant information to pretty much entice recruiters to hire them, right? So recruiters, hiring managers, other designers, it's something that helps them see your work. It's very similar to your portfolio, but less detailed. But also, of course, there's some kind of precision you have to put into it so that those recruiters can so that they're tempted to talking to you more and potentially hire you. So, like I said, feel free to use these tips on whatever industry you're in, and also to share them with your friends because they really apply with whatever industry, right? So, of course, the first thing that matters about a resume is that it is always unique, right? So every company has different job requirements. Every company has its own unique traits. So you want to ensure that you're making your resume um, you're making it unique for that company, right? You're make sure that you're aligning your skills and experience with that job description, right? So one thing that I always advise people is to have a copy of the description on the left, and then a copy of the draft that you're actually like trying to write up for your resume on the right, and then just make sure that you're tying the work that you've done directly to the roles that you're trying to the role qualifications that you're trying to apply for, right? And of course, don't forget to include data, right? That's very important. I mean, that's how you measure, um, like if you were to tell me, sorry about that. Okay, so if you were to tell me that you increased revenue by a certain percentage, right? I want to be able to know by how much percentage because it could be one person. I mean, it could be one, by $1, by $2, whatever it is. But if you tell me a percentage, that just gives me a better perspective of what you actually did, right? And then the next thing too is that you have to be specific about the projects you've worked on or managed, right? So by that, I mean you want to talk about the outcome, right? So you want to talk about what was the actual result of that project that you worked on. You also want to talk about how you measured success, like I mentioned earlier, right? So how do you do that? By including data, right? That's how I measured success, by this kind of data. And then also figuring out ways you can quantitate it. If it's qualitative information, how can you quantitate it? Or how can you judge that information so that a recruiter knows exactly what you did, right? So one thing that I actually got from my fiance who manages a company. She actually owns a company called Bracelet Consulting. You can catch them here. Is another shameless plug, by the way. And here she actually helps people get jobs, and she helps people with preparations, resumes, and all that kind of stuff. So she helped me with acquiring my job. And one thing she always told me is that I have to use the XYZ formula, right? And what that is that, what you accomplished, how you measured it, and also what you did to accomplish that goal, right? So for example, the formula actually goes accomplished X, right, as measured by by Y, and then by doing Z, right? So a good example is increased Tadloid's monthly website visitors by 43%, right? So this is what I did. I increased Tadloid's website monthly visitors, and then by 43%. That's how I measured it. So for every 100 people, another 43 people came to the website, right? And then by clarifying the website's about and services information, right? So this shows recruiters and managers that you know exactly what you were doing, right? It even tells the story that, hey, by Tadiwa um, improving or clarifying the about and services section, right? The people that were looking at the website, they loved it so much that they were sharing it to other people, and then that increased the amount of visitors by 43%, right? So it tells some kind of story. And then the next thing too is that don't be afraid to talk about leadership, right? Leadership is something that a lot of companies really care about, regardless of the industry. I mean, you don't have to have it, but I think a lot of us have probably led in some way at some point. And what I mean is, it could be in a school project, right? A time when you're a group, group leader, right? Or a time when you were the project leader, right? Then you want to talk about how big was your team, right? If it was a group of 5 people, right? How big was that team? And also, what was the scope of your work? Okay, yeah, we had to do some research, talk to a bunch of other professors, and come up with information that we presented in front of our class, right? How did you measure that, right? At the end, we came up with we got 100% in our project, or we got 95% in score in our project, right? And then also, if you have some kind of experience, definitely talk about the day that your manager was not feeling well. Talk about the day that you volunteered to lead a group session, right? Talk about what you did, what was the outcome of that event. I mean, there's so much of information you can pull and structure to match what you want for your resume, right? And again, you have to tie it to the requirements or the whatever the company is looking for. All right. And then a lot of people also ask me, what if I have a little bit of experience? What if I don't, know much? I haven't really worked out there. I've done, a few projects at school, but I don't think it's enough. Well, I'm telling you now that all of your work is important, right? So if you don't have a lot of experience, talk about the information that you've done. I mean, the projects that you've done in college, right? Talk about the coursework that you've done, right? Talk about all of that, and like I said before, just articulate it in a way that allows those people to see those skills, that allows you to demonstrate your relevance, those relevant skills and knowledge. Right. And then finally, you want to keep it short. I think this is something that we already know, that less is more, right? Of course, there's no length requirements with resumes, and a lot of companies, they don't really care. But as a designer, as a user experience designer, or honestly as anyone, they want to, in a way, they judge you, or they see if you have short information, they see that you're mature enough to consider that that recruiter is busy, and then that they're looking at a lot of information, that they don't have any time to be looking at your 50-page resume, right? So ensure that your work is concise, you're showing the most relevant information according to the job description, as well as information that allows you to shine, right? You want to come out on top. So definitely ensure that your work is short. And then, so that's the last bit about resumes. And then I'm just going to dive into cover letters, right? It's just one page, but pretty much cover letters work the same way. So the same information that I've been telling you about resumes, about portfolios, this also applies to cover letters, right? Not a lot of companies require cover letters. I think a lot of tech companies really don't care. They just want your skills and that's it. But a lot of times you have the option to include a cover letter. And honestly, I advise you to do it because it's a way you get to pitch yourself outside of just a recruiter looking at your resume and your portfolio and not knowing much about you, right? So it's your chance to talk your heart out to that recruiter or that company and for them to really consider you based on whatever you would have said, right? So, for example, the things that I was saying is very similar, right? So the fact that you have to tailor your cover letter to the job you're applying for. Again, have your description right there, and then the cover letter or the draft, whatever it is you're working on, have them next to each other. Ensure that you're matching that information and you're shining through it, right? And then also, don't be afraid to tell the company how you've made a difference, right? And use data to back it up. Data is very important. I think I've mentioned this so many times so far. It's very important to back up that information with data, right? And then you want to draw a direct line between your passion and the position you're applying for. So it's very crucial for you to show them that you really care about this position, you really care about the job, right? Because a lot of people are applying, and a lot of people, they just putting in applications possibly without their cover letters, right? So it's your chance to stand out. There might be someone with the same experience as you, or someone with more experience, but they just like dead inside. They just don't, they don't have much on there. But whereas with your cover letter, you're able to pour your heart out to them and um, show them exactly, how you feel about the company and the work you're doing, right? So another thing too is that don't be afraid to show them who you are, right? Don't be afraid for them for them to see who you are, right? And what I mean by that is, talk about your personal life, right? But not too much. Of course, talk about where you're from, talk about, what drives you, right, as a designer, right? Maybe small experiences that you've had in the past. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of companies or a lot of recruiters love to connect with you, right? In the job where I work right now, one of my interviews was with a guy, Chris, right? And I remember he talked about his experience coming in from Cuba. He was, actually from Portugal, and how they came. They were a poor family and so forth, and they went through a lot, to get to where they are now, right? So I had a similar story, and I told him mine, and we connected just like that. And just like that, I got an advocate. I got someone in the company to go say, "This guy's a great guy. This guy would be a good addition to our team." So definitely show them who you are, right? Don't be afraid that, oh, maybe it's not professional or something like that. Definitely um, dive in there with your heart open. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me. That's my whole presentation. Thank you so much for the time that you guys have spent with me. Hope I didn't bore you to death. And hopefully it wasn't too much information to take in. And definitely, after this, connect with me, reach out to me on LinkedIn or Instagram, whatever it is, and then we can connect on there. And then if you have any questions, I think this is the time. It's our Q&A time. So yeah,
Awesome. Thanks, Taddy. That's great.
just stop sharing.
So if anyone's got a question, just I think just raise your hand with the little reaction thing at the bottom of your screen, or just unmute yourself and speak. There's not too many of us, so. I guess I can get the questions rolling. How many interviews did you do on your job hunt?
Oh, geez. In total or for the specific job that where I'm working right now?
Well, for in total, like.
Okay, yeah. So I definitely applied to over 80 companies. I mean, honestly, possibly more than that. And interviews, companies that allowed me to interview with them, maybe about 20 something.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how, like, I'm sort of going through this process right now.
Yeah.
I've been doing a bunch of interviews, getting rejected. How did
Yeah.
you handle that? Because it's kind of, yeah, it can be a bit depressing.
Right. Yeah. So you have to have some kind of support system, and I'm telling you, you can't do it by yourself. And that's why I'm happy about this community that you guys created, because we can support each other. We can give each other some advice. So one of the things that I did was obviously to seek mentors, right? To seek, people that would constantly reassure me that I am a good designer, right? I'm doing well. It's just that I don't have the experience, and also I was learning how to articulate myself, to sell myself better, right? So by constantly communicating to these people, I was able to see, where I was coming up short, what I needed to fix, and so forth. So that definitely helped me. And then also my fiance, I was mentioning, she's a recruiter. I mean, sorry, she helps people get jobs, right? So she's a career coach. She was able to help me throughout the process. I practiced with her and so forth. So yeah, that's pretty much how I handle that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome, man. Thanks. John, you had a question?
Hi, Tadiwa. So,
So
okay,
John.
so I wanted to, so, like from your presentation, you mentioned that you have like some freelance experience, or you have done
Right,
freelance before.
right.
So when it comes to like actually using, like, I guess, because I think at least for me, when it comes to freelance,
Mhm.
I guess it would depend on the client, but sometimes maybe they just want you to be the guy who just gets things done, and
Right,
there isn't that much of a like a collaboration where you can easily get data or you can do like
right, right,
user research. So if you wanted to use like your freelance work in your portfolio or as a case study, how
hmm
effective would it be if, let's say, their processes don't align with maybe the processes of like the company you want to work with?
right,
Because I feel like sometimes like certain projects handicap you when you want to like showcase that you did this, because
right.
they'll be like, the way you guys do things. I mean, yeah, the end product looks nice, but I feel like maybe because of the way you did things, you're not like a right fit for it. So I feel like
Right.
sometimes the projects you take might penalize you.
Okay. Yeah. So that's an excellent question, man. I definitely had the same question when I was going through my processes, and this one mentor of mine, Thelma, she pretty much helped me kind of restructure my story, right? So it's about storytelling, right? So you have this freelance project you've done. Of course, you're saying you've worked on it by yourself, but if you really think about it, you didn't work by yourself, right? You had to confirm it with your stakeholders, right? The person you were designing whatever you're doing with, right? So talk about that. Talk about how you constantly had to talk to them, get feedback from them, and involve them in the process of your design. Talk about how you asked other designers, right, for their feedback, right? How you were working on. Sorry, what were you working on? Just
So one of the projects that I worked on was like I was working on a security app. Well, it's actually
okay,
like I worked on the security app, then I went to like he pretty much had me work on the security app,
hmm
then the website, then the administration portal. So it's
okay,
kind of like he had me do like the entire thing, but it took like a while. It was in
okay. Yeah, I
different
mean,
phases. Yeah, yeah.
so that's definitely some great experience. Those are three different projects you can talk about, right? So yeah, do you just break it down, talk about your process of, how you interviewed. If you didn't interview anyone, I mean, some of it, of course you talk to your family, right? You're like, hey, does this look good to you? You got some kind of feedback. That's a form of collaboration, right? So especially if you talk to other designers and they gave you some kind of feedback, they told you some suggestions, talk about all of that. And then in your interviews, make sure that you explain how you collaborated, right? How you define that as collaboration, pulling in other designers in their own time or in their spare time to come in and pour in some information into your work, right? So I think that's a great way you can speak to your project in collaboration.
Awesome. That was a great
Does
question,
that
John.
answer your question, or is there anything more you'd like me
Yeah, I
to
think I'm
talk
answered.
about?
Thanks.
All right, sounds good.
That's cool. Yeah, I just had an additional thought there for John was like maybe you didn't have the authority to do things your own way or to run the user research, but
hmm
that could be something you write in your portfolio as like reflections. What you learned
Right,
from that project was we should have done more user research,
right.
and next time what you'll do differently. So they, whoever's interviewing you, you can see that you understood
That,
what's
yeah.
missing from that. Yeah.
Exactly. And then also those are constraints, right? Constraints you can highlight in your project that I didn't have the power to do this and that. However, those people that were not giving me the power to do that, I had to communicate with them, right? I had to get their feedback because if you're just designing something and no one's approving it, then I don't know, like I think that's not really helpful for them, right? You're just designing whatever you like. So that process of them sitting down with you and giving you feedback, that's a form of collaboration. So definitely speak to that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there another question from anyone?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Tadiwa. So, I mean, of course, you talked about the different interviews and all that you went through. How were you able to deal with, be it feedback from the interviewers or be it constructive criticism, quote unquote, when you didn't get an offer where they turned you down?
Yeah, so this is something I really love about the UX community. The fact that, you know, they don't necessarily reject you, right? I mean, they'll tell you, worst case of rejection is that they don't even respond to you, right? But they always tell you that, look, you're a great designer, and they won't be lying to you, and it's not just like fluff or anything like that. They'll tell you, yeah, you're a good designer, it's just that you don't have that experience. And you can always ask, hey, so what in my interview where did I go wrong? Or what was the problem? Why is it that you didn't accept me, right? And then they'll write out a detailed explanation of, you know, what happened. It's, I think, just one interview with Google. That's where they told me they couldn't tell me more, but one of the managers ended up coming on the side and telling me and helping me out. But anyway, so definitely take that feedback and use it, because it'll help you grow. Those people they know, you know, their job well, right? And then also the other thing you should always remember is that they're not against you. They just want to see if you're a good fit, right? So definitely write down all of that feedback, try and reflect on your work, and then see how you can, you know, use that feedback to improve yourself for the next interview, right? So imagine I interviewed with about 20 something companies, and each time I was, honestly, it was, I think, until maybe the fifth company that I realized that I need to be using this feedback to improve myself. So once I started doing that, I started getting some traction, right? More interviews, right? And then also, I just started getting better in the way I was articulating myself, the way I was, you know, I got more confident because I knew more. I started using that feedback to research and learn more things. And if I'm being completely honest, I think a lot of my UX skills came from my interview process, because I had to, looking at the job description and seeing that there was something I couldn't do, I wanted to stand out. So I went and started researching and learning that stuff. And eventually when the interview came around, I knew exactly what I was talking about. So yeah, I know that was a little too much, but I hope it answers your question.
Awesome. Anyone else with a question?
Okay. So first thing, you didn't mention anything about Behance regarding your portfolio and stuff. I wanted to know if you use online platforms like that. Then there's an issue of privacy regarding the projects that we work on and putting them into the portfolio.
Right.
Is there a process you have for getting permission to put certain things in your portfolio? Are there any things that you have to sign off for, or how do you go around NDAs and stuff?
Okay.
And then when you're preparing your resume or your CV and stuff, sorry, I don't know if you're noting them down or if I should ask one at a time.
I want to, do you mind asking me a question one at a time, and then we can, if that's okay. All right, so what was that first question again?
The first one was hosting your portfolio.
Yeah.
You've got your website, but then you also use other platforms like Behance.
Right.
There's a lot more creators on there, and people discover your work a lot better there.
Yeah, okay, so that's a great question. I'm gonna share my screen for a quick second. I want to show you guys something. And I didn't want to share this because I thought it would be a little bit complicated or it's a little too much, but now that you mention that, and it's very simple. So you go to tadnm.com. If you notice, this is my portfolio, right? If you know some work, I actually have a drop down over here. So one to my case study, which comes to this homepage, right, which shows the projects that I've worked on and so forth. Sorry, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So, and then other information. So here now you would include maybe, you know, Behance, you would include, you know, Dribble and all that kind of stuff. You'd include it under this drop down, right? Or you could even include it on your homepage, right? So you can say other places where you can find my work. and that can be just part of your portfolio. So that's how I do it. I just have other, and here I'm able to show, information like how I worked with a friend to help them with their project at work, right? And then I can also show my Medium, because I also started writing articles on Mediums about, some stuff that I've done. So yeah, so that's just one way you can do that. And then what was your second question? I think you talked about permissions and like NDAs and so forth, right?
Yeah, the next question was around getting permission to use certain work for your
Right.
portfolio
Okay.
and stuff.
Yeah, so I feel like UX work a lot of times is very general, right? So there's some things that where you really don't need permission. Of course, you want to make sure you talk to the company first, right? Um, one way you can actually get permission easily without, having to go back and forth is to come up with your case study, right? Write it up, have all the information you want to show that's not sensitive, right? And then present that to whoever is in charge, the person, your stakeholder that gives you permission to share it or not. And then they can help you cut out like any information that they think is sensitive, and stuff like that. I think you can always also, because a lot of, if it's like a website or if it's like a company app or something like that, you can always show screenshots of that, and then just explain that, hey, I worked on this together with a team of 5, and you don't have to mention their names if they don't want to be mentioned. And then there are ways that you can always make it where you don't have to just like tell people the sensitive private information. So yeah, I think the best way is just to come up with your portfolio, your case study, and then presenting it to your stakeholder, or whoever's in your manager or something like that, and they can approve of it. And then your third question?
Not sure if this would be the. Okay, so my third question is basically around specialization. So
Okay.
I don't know how deep you are into UX career
Yeah.
now, but some people work strictly as UX researchers. Others were more into design.
Right.
In these, UX design, there's product design.
Right.
There's a UX unicorns, the guys
Right.
doing everything. You said you did web, dev, something. Yeah, we both did like computer science and stuff. So at least
Right.
it puts us closer to unicorn and front end development and stuff. But
Right.
aren't there specific ways of approaching each type of job that you might be looking for? Or is this like a guideline in general for looking for UX work out there?
So I think it applies to whatever position you're applying for, right? So for example, I knew I wanted to do some research and also some design work, right? So it's a bit of a mix. And a lot of times you find that designers often are involved in the research too, right? But, if you're trying to be a UX researcher, right, it's really the same process. You're talking about your project, and then just make sure you're clarifying more in your portfolio, clarifying more of the research work, right? And then if you're trying to be a designer, talk about that more. And then, if really just talk about exactly what you want. And a lot of times it's very confusing if you're trying to do too many things at the same time, right? So you need to have sort of like a niche, because if you're working towards trying to be all of those different things, right? You're competing with a million people, right? But if you can, boil it down to one specific thing that you want to do, or at least two, right? For example, I'm trying to do both research. I'm doing both research and design, right? But then shallow research, just a little bit. So I can make that my niche, right? And so instead of competing with a million people, I'm competing with hundreds of thousands of people. And then I can even boil that down even into a smaller number, because um, I can have like a specification where I'm like, I want to be in the e-commerce industry, right? And then I just look at jobs that do e-commerce, or in my case, I want to do education. So I was primarily focusing on education related companies, right? So I was going in that direction. So my competition was probably in the tens, 20,000s, right? So imagine coming from a place where I'm competing with millions of people all the way down to, thousands only because I'm deciding to have a niche instead of going for everything. And then the other thing is, if you feel like you want to do everything, you can start with one specific thing. And then once you're within the company, you can always tell them that, hey, I'm also interested in this thing. So can I try it? And then when they see that you're good at it, guess what? You're getting a promotion, right? So that's a good thing. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. If you have a follow-up, don't be afraid to let me know.
I would like to add on to what you just said, Taddy. Um, well, it's a bit of a different view actually. So looking at someone like me, I am skilled both in design and in coding, so I can qualify either as a UX designer or as a UX engineer. So I saw this tip, I don't remember where I saw it, but the recruiter was just saying, well, what you need to have is maybe a template where you work from, a template with your cover letter and your resume. And then for each job, you have to adjust your resume according to the job description. So if I'm applying for a UX design job, then I'll focus more on the UX design part of things in my cover letter and in my resume.
Right.
And I focus more on the skills and tools that I use in that part of me. And then if I'm applying for maybe a front-end job, then I'll adjust my resume accordingly. But the general tip going around is that it's better to specialize. You have less competition when you specialize than if you try to be a unicorn. A unicorn, you usually get employed in startups because they want someone who can do as much work as possible. Compared to if you're a specialist, you're probably working in a product team for a huge company. So it all depends on what you want.
Right. Right. And that pretty much ties with, what I was presenting earlier, right? You having the role description and then also your resume or cover letter, and then just using that description to build out your resume, right? So every resume is unique. Having that template, like Kim said, and then just like using your description to fill it out. I think, yeah, you're spot on with that. So, yeah.
Just say, so I guess I bring it up to push the discussion as well, because it's just an important note to have. Like let's say regarding how I've been at the company I am for about 4 years, heading to 5 or so. But I joined the company as an Android developer. And like my first, I think I did Android for like 3 months, and then I actually set up the UX department. That's what we've specialized in now. But yeah, I think with what Kim is saying, and it's super important to say that for startups won't be looking for a specialist. They're generally trying to get someone who does as much as possible.
Right.
I mean, but yeah, I guess I was trying to figure out from your area, because I'm still in Africa, you in the States. I don't know.
Right.
There might be some different approach in that regard.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and it's similar. Some companies, like Kim was saying, startups, right? They'll ask you if you have to know some kind of coding, right? So you have to know some React, React or JS, React Native, that kind of stuff. And this is a UX design position. So essentially, they're asking you to be a unicorn from the start, right? And for me personally, that wasn't really a problem. Of course, I mentioned that my problem was that I didn't have experience, but in terms of coding and that kind of stuff, I'd already done that in computer science. So I knew that, but, and then I was learning the UX side and I was trying to improve that. So definitely, I think it's all the same, whether you're in, Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, wherever you are. And here it's everything, it applies, where UX is UX. So, yeah.
Awesome. Does anyone else got a question?
Oh, just something else. Why the States? Why not come back to Africa?
Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna come back at some point. It's just that at the moment I was doing school, and then my mom lives here too, so I'm staying with her. And then also my fiance lives here too, so then for those that know me, they're like, wait, fiance, fiance, I recently got engaged. So yeah, I will talk to you more about that. But yeah, that's why I'm in the US. But I'm at some point definitely I'll come back to Zimbabwe. So yeah.
How are you, because you've got Tadloid, your sort of startup.
Mhm.
Is it just you working on that, or are there other people working on that?
So it's me and then people that help me out, and then also I have like agreements with universities, right? So the universities that we primarily work with are Kennesaw State University, Georgia State University, both universities I actually went to. And then we also have Georgia Gwinnett College, Valdosta State University, and then the last one is, geez, what is it? There's a last one, there's a fifth one. So yeah.
And how are you thinking about like now you starting a new job? How are you going to balance things with like working on that?
Right. So the thing, as I was mentioning earlier, I work remotely, and I work from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., 5:30 p.m. So that's about 6 hours ish, right? All of it is remote. As long as I do my work within that period and I don't have extra work, I can still work on, my other side projects. So it's not just Tadloid I'm working on, it's Tadloid and a bunch of other small little ventures. So, and then of course my regular job. So yeah.
That's cool. All right. Any other questions?
Okay, I can go ahead and unmute and just ask my question.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to ask you. Currently, I do web development, and I have some design experience and all that. So I've seen that in a lot of my projects, I've more or less started kind of taking on UX type roles, because I have to do a lot of like research and the best way for this and that to happen. And I did decide quite a while ago that I wanted to transition more into UX. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say is the best way of transitioning from like a development type environment and to go more into UX? Because I'm actually very interested in that field, and I find myself more and more intrigued by it and wanting to do more and more of it, rather than just the typical this project, that project, and so on.
Okay. And you're working for a company, or this is freelance?
To support myself, I'm working for a company, but I've done a lot of freelance as well. So because by profession, I'm a coder, but outside of that, I'm a designer, if that makes sense.
All right. So what I mean is, so all of this transition, you finding yourself doing UX work, this is for your company, right? I mean, for the company you're working for?
Okay, so I guess the best way that I can put it is, for the company I'm working for a lot of the projects, I do end up finding, like, I have interviews with like the clients and stuff, where I ask them what their goal is, and I try to like design what they're working on around their goal. And I'd been reading rather on UX to help me be a better developer and designer, and I realized that I actually like UX. Then on the freelance side, I've been designing certain things for myself and on personal projects and other side projects as well, and I've been leaning more into UX type things as well. So I've just decided I'm just going to try transition more into that. So I know that it's more in depth than what I'm used to doing. So that's what I wanted to find out.
Okay, yeah, no, it's actually amazing that you're doing that. I have a friend, Levi, and he does exactly what you're doing. So he was hired as a software engineer, but he's constantly finding himself having to do some UX work, because I mean, if you really think about it, you can't develop a website without planning what you're going to develop, right? You have to sketch it out, think about how your users are going to interact with that application or website, whatever it is that you're building, and then then go on to building it, right? You have to get research, all that stuff, right? So I think for you to transition, I think that's actually a great opportunity for you to actually get a raise, right? Because, or to ask for, a raise or some kind of extra compensation, because you're doing a two man's job, right? So you want to find some job description out there for a UX designer, right? Bring it to your manager and tell them that, hey, look, this is literally what I'm doing. This is what I should be doing, right? So is there a way I can either transition into this UX, because if I'm spending more time in that area, I can create better products for the company? Or if you want to merge both of them, and then I guess, I don't know if you want to do both, and be a unicorn. Of course that means more pay for you, but that's also another option, right? So definitely, I think the best way you can do that is educate yourself more. Of course, go in, learn more about, there are lots of YouTube videos, there's this community, right, to guide you, to help you learn more about UX. And then, like I said, go to your manager, just show them the two job descriptions, right? And then let them know that you want to raise, or or you can't continue working on two jobs, that working on two different working in two different areas that should have two different people working on them. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, I guess we can wrap up unless there's any last questions. I think where can people get hold of you, Tadi?
Yeah,
They've
so
got any-
definitely on LinkedIn. You can find me, Tadiwa Mangadze. That's, I think it should be, yeah, just find it. If you check on the flyer, just Tadiwa Mangadze, you can find me on LinkedIn. And then also same Tadiwa Mangadze on Instagram, and then Facebook as well. So yeah, and then also in the group chat, if you're in the group chat, definitely reach out to me on WhatsApp, and I'm always available to talk.
Yeah,
And then
awesome.
if you're ever thinking about setting up a meeting, a Zoom meeting, just like reach out to me first over text or call or something, and then we can set up some time to talk. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Tadi. I really enjoyed kind of the way you shared also how sort of your early experiences of
Right.
software, and just like having those experiences of seeing, oh, how software can change your life, or how
Right.
different software like saves you time and stuff. And I think for people who are just getting into UX, that's amazing, just to kind of, maybe they've had those experiences themselves. They're like very relatable, and they can see,
Right.
oh, right, there's this whole career path they can be following. And of course, everything else you shared after that is just fantastic. So thanks so much for everyone else here. Thanks for joining, and thanks for all your questions. If you aren't part of the UX Zimbabwe WhatsApp group, and you would like to join, you can contact me. I'm Kim BF White on LinkedIn, or if you're connected with anyone else here already, they'll sort of get you in the group too. And hopefully we can do some more talks like this, and we're going to be just asking you questions too on how the UX Zimbabwe group can better serve you and what you want to get out of it in the future. So we're going to be doing a bit of user research with all of you and seeing how the community can best serve you. Great. Thanks for coming, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Kim, and thank you everyone for coming.